You've been making this point forever, which is for far too long. And I don't want to say it's just conservatives, because I think it's just rational people opposed to this crazy agenda have done as told. They've done as instructed, just kept their mouth shut. They didn't want to be called the names. And you've really been leading the battle of stop being so silent. Fight.
Yeah.
Like, speak up.
To your point, we did a poll at the Daily Wire. We noticed something was happening in all the national polling around the Florida legislation, which is that instead of actually presenting the people being polled with the text of the bill itself, pollsters were framing language to present to parents or to the people being polled, and the language was always really slanted. So we did a poll where we just presented 1,000 people nationwide with the actual text of the bill. 37% of them Democrats, 32% of them Republicans, the rest of independents. What we discovered is everyone opposes teaching kids under 8 in public schools, these radical sex and gender theories. The majority of Democrats, the majority of independents, obviously the majority of Republicans. So of course it's not actually partisan where the average American is concerned. It's partisan only in the sense that the parties have, the sort of radical elements in particular in the Democrat Party sort of drive the ship at the moment. But almost everyone agrees that kids don't need to be subjected to this kind of stuff. And that's why I think the Daily Wire has a lot of success right now when we do fight back against these kinds of ideas, because yes, of course, conservatives really support what we're doing. But I think a lot of people are offended by what's happening in the country, particularly where kids are concerned. I think a lot of people, feel betrayed by companies like Disney, who were a major part of their childhood, probably their parents' childhood, and they always imagined would be an important part of their own children's childhood. And when you hear that, no, they've gone all in now on inculcating radical sex and gender theory into incredibly small children, well, that's just too much for people.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I love it because people are like, they aren't teaching, they're teaching tolerance, or on the critical race theory, they're only teaching history. And I, having lived this, firsthand with my own children, say, okay, whatever you can call, I don't care what you call it. You can call it whatever you want. We'll use whatever terms you want. My 8-year-old sat in a class where they told him and his other little buddies that when they turned 18, they could chop off their penises if they wanted to become women, and they could take puberty blockers between then and now, between 8 and 18, to stave off manhood if that was their choice. And when the parents confronted the science teacher on why she said that to them, she said, we take the conversation wherever the boys lead it. Oh, sure. Okay. So the 8-year-old boys led that. And by the way, totally inappropriate anyway. If I followed the conversation every time my 8-year-old took me to an inappropriate place, I'd live there. Like, my God, you don't do that as a responsible grown-up. So that's number one. And then on the race stuff, again, you can call it whatever you want. Don't teach in my school, in my son's school, that quote, in every classroom where white children learn, there is a future killer cop. Because that's what you wanted as mandated reading for every faculty member who has access to my 2 sons. You can call it whatever the hell you want. Screw you. Stop teaching it. I don't CRT. And it's happening. So you need people who say this Florida bill is unnecessary. Tell it to my son's 3rd grade science teacher. She was 9 months pregnant, so we couldn't yell at her. But we were angry. We were angry at this woman for presuming to do what this bill now specifically says in Florida you may not do.
Yeah, that's right. The left's favorite trick is do something radical. When anyone says, hey, that's radical, say, we're not doing it. There's nothing radical is even happening. Also, you aren't allowed to take any steps to stop if it were happening. And then within about 6 months, they'll say, yes, it's happening and it's good. Right, and then after it fails miserably, they'll come back and say, we shouldn't do that. No one ever should have done it.
We were never in favor of it.
Yeah, we were never in favor of it. Exactly.
Now, another school, 2 points, in New York City, we weren't at Dalton, but Dalton's even crazier than our schools, if that's possible, or at least was. It still is. And they were sort of going out on the limb. We sort of covered the gender stuff and the race stuff, but also the inappropriate, like, sex education, like sex about your bodies, whether it's kink,
right.
Too much education about sex too soon. This was a cartoon at Dalton. Is this a soundbite or a full screen, team? I guess it's a soundbite. Oh, it's the woman who even this woman wound up getting shamed for doing this because the parent body fought back. But here's this woman who was brought in to educate, I think it was kindergartners, 1st graders. Say again? Yeah, 1st grade on what happens to one's body parts. Listen to this.
Hey, how come my penis gets big sometimes and points up in the air?
That's called an erection.
Sometimes I touch my penis because it feels good.
Sometimes when I'm in my bath or when Mom puts me to bed, I like to touch my vulva too.
You have a clitoris there, Kayla, that probably feels good to touch the same way Keith's penis feels good when he touches it. But have you ever noticed that older kids and grown-ups don't touch their private parts in public?
They don't?
That's right, Keith. It's okay to touch yourself and see how different body parts feel, but it's best to only do it in private.
Oh my God. This woman came in and she showed that video to a bunch of first graders.
Unbelievable. Well, you hear about this camp that's happening in Indianapolis where they're teaching 3rd through 5th graders how to use a condom.
Oh my God.
They've lost their mind. Yeah, there's some great reporting that one of our Daily Wire reporters did on this. You know, you pay $250, drop your 3rd grade student off, and they learn how to put a condom on. By the way, in a mixed gender environment. They're not segregating the kids by gender because they say gender is a spectrum, so it'd be impossible to even know how to separate kids at this point. And all kids of all genders need to know how to put a condom on at 8 years old. I mean, it's absolute insanity. What I can't believe is that the left hasn't learned anything. I mean, look at what happened in Loudoun County last October. Look at the results of the election there last November. Unseated, Terry McAuliffe put Youngkin in as governor there. No political group in America has ever been stupid enough to mobilize parents as a voting demographic until right now. The left has somehow managed to turn parents into a voting demographic, and they're going to bear quite a harvest, I think, for their efforts.
Gosh, I can't remember the number, but I was listening to the Daily Wire's morning podcast. It's called Morning Wire. I love it. This morning, and they were talking about something like a 19-point Republican advantage on the generic ballot right now. I mean, it's crazy. It's definitely double digits, and it hasn't been this promising for the GOP since Newt Gingrich and the contract with America back in the 1994, I think. Or it's looking like it's going to be a bloodbath akin to what we saw during when Obama said he took a thumping after he pushed through Obamacare without majority support of the American people. I mean, because, as you say, they have mobilized parents, and they won't back down. They backed off of defund the police. But they aren't backing off of this stuff at all. The woke stuff, they won't back off of that.
They can't. I mean, it's a trap of their own making, right? They've essentially mobilized the most radical elements of their base around these ideas, and now if they move off of them, they're worried that they'll, they can absorb the loss of one election, but they can't absorb the loss of their base. I think that's what their calculation is right now. I think most Americans are fairly stunned at what a radical Joe Biden is as president on these social issues. They think we've known Joe Biden since he was literally too young to actually serve in the Senate and had to wait for his birthday in order to be sworn into his seat. So, they think we understand the guy. I think what they failed to actually comprehend is that someone survives in politics that long by being a shrewd political operator, and he understands the moment that he's in where his base is concerned. Does Nancy Pelosi not believe in gender? And if not, in the gender binary, and if not, when did she stop believing in the gender binary? Her entire career has essentially been premised on the gender binary and the feminism of the 60s, 70s, 80s. So I mean, the entire notion is nonsensical that they actually think these things. What they think is they aren't going to be able to win if they don't say them. And so I think that's the trap they're in. And hate to see it.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.